Hello, Breaking Bots. This is Mr. Barrett again. This is part two of the Claw Robot. If you didn't see part one, go back and catch that. We are going to be looking at the Java in this video. So we've already gone through this and discussed how this thing's going to be set up and how we're going to be controlling it with three buttons. When we export the Java code, it shows up as this, and this should look familiar if you watch the arcade drive robot. It's very similar to this. So we're going to get these things kind of for free. The robot builder builds these gray ones for us, and then the green ones we created in robot builder, and now we're going to go fill them out. So you see we got our Talon, we got our claw subsystem, we've got some commands down here, and we've got three buttons that are each tied to the commands that are hanging off of the claw joystick. So yeah, that thing that I didn't mention the last one, I'm going to put these slides in the description of the YouTube below. So let's get into the Visual Studio Code. So go ahead and open this up, and then we're going to open the folder. There's open folder right there of, let's see, I think I put it here, users, me, FRC projects, and there's Clawbot. So if I select that, it'll go through and open things up. It always puts up this help. You feel free to close that, or you can read through and see what's happening. But every time this thing opens up, Gradle is going to go through and do a little pre-build of our code. So you can see it's going through and making sure everything works. The first time through is always takes a while because it's got to set up some of the background stuff. So once that completes, we should be able to get in and start looking at the code. So you can see build successful, 22 seconds. We're done. So let's close that out. There's a welcome here if you want to see some stuff about Visual Studio Code, the IDE. If you look down the side here, we've got our Clawbot, which is our project. Source, which is our source code for all of everything that we've developed. So this is what Robot Builder has spit out for us. You can see here's our classes. Here's that main class that starts the robot. Here's OI. This is going to be a little different than the drive robot. So remember we created buttons for this thing. So if we look in here, we should see them. So you can see there's three buttons: open, close, and stop. And then there's the joystick. And so OI, which stands for operator interface, is the thing that builds all the UI for us. So you can see it creates our claw joystick in position 0, which is what we set up in Robot Builder. It's got a button, which is on claw joystick button 3. So this thing actually put it in reverse order. So there's a 3, 2, and 1. So first thing it does is it always creates a button and puts it wherever you mapped it to, and then it will actually stick the command that we did on that button. So you can see stop claw is instantiating a stop claw command whenever it is pressed. And the same thing for close. Close is on button 2. And while close and open are a little different because you can see that in the stop there's no argument being passed in. But remember, close and open are time commands, so that 2 is the 2 seconds that we put in Robot Builder. And then the Smart Dashboard, that's for another time. We'll discuss that later. And then the OI provides one method where you can actually get the instance of the claw joystick and do things with it. We're not going to be doing that in this lesson. So we look at robot. That's what main actually started up for us. So I go through here. Here's the claw subsystem. That's good. And you can see there, this thing is going to go, and every subsystem will be built in here. So this is only built in our claw subsystem. Here it's creating that operator interface class that we just created, or we just looked at, sorry. So once this happens, now our joystick will be initialized, all the buttons set up, and the commands ready to go. And here's all the different modes of operation that the robot can operate in. Disabled happens before a match and then after a match. So when to make sure the robots don't do anything, these are called. So it initializes and does this periodic thing, which should be doing nothing on the robot. Autonomous mode is the first 15 seconds. So they will hit the go on the match. Autonomous will start running, and then the periodic will continue to run, and we'll do whatever we put in here for the thing to automatically do while the the drivers have their hands off the joystick. And then once that 15 seconds is up, teleopnet, which is will kick in, and that's when the drivers get to run. So we're not going to do anything in a robot for this lesson, but I just kind of want to go through that you guys again. These are all public methods, and these are all kind of controlled by FRC and when they're running the match. So let's look at the subsystem first. Here's our claw subsystem, and let's see what we got in here. Okay, so we got a claw controller, the Talon. That's what we set up, and it's on PWM0 by the, you can see this argument here, and it's not inverted, so we're not going to concern ourselves with that. The controller, it's let's see, init default command, we got nothing to do there. Periodic, we got nothing to do here, but we need to add some things for our claw subsystem to do. So it needs to run the motor for us. So what we're going to do here is provide the methods, and they conveniently put the comment in here. It says put methods for controlling the subsystem here. So nice of them. Everything that you do in Java it can have a scope to it. It can be it can be public, private, or protected. I won't cover protected right now, but public means that any class can have access to an attribute or method that you declare as public. So we're going to provide 3 commands for people to perform actions on the claw, which is going to be an open, a close, and a stop. So here we're declaring the command that they can use. Void is the return, so void just means this method does not return any values, so just call it, it'll do its thing, and it exits without returning anything to the caller. And so I'm going to make this open claw. And so what are we going to do when we open the claw? Well, we're going to run a motor. And to do that, if you remember up here, we've got our claw controller, which is running the Talon. So if I go in here and say claw controller, that's getting the instance that we created here. When we do a new, we get an instance of an object. So now we have an actual thing that is hooked up to PWM0 and is going to control whatever motor's hanging out on there. So I do claw controller and you do a dot. Now it's going to give me all the different methods and things that I can do with the claw controller. Well, we want to run the thing. So let's see, is there a run in here? You can look through all these. Get position, get rid. So there's a bunch of things you can do with a speed controller. But here's the thing that we want, this set. This set is going to tell the motor to run a direction, and it depends on whether it's positive or negative. So set the speed. Motors run from -1 to 1. So we're going to run this at, let's run it at full speed forward. Set 1. So that's going to be our open. Okay. That's pretty simple. So anytime someone calls this, the motor is going to start turning in whatever direction 1 tells it to go. So it'll be clockwise or counterclockwise. We need our other methods. So if I do a public void close claw, and we're going to get the claw controller again, we're going to set the speed. What speed will be the opposite of open? Well, it's going to be completely the other direction, a -1. So this is going to run it one direction, this is going to run it the other. And if it's backwards, then you just switch negative sign here and you can run your motor in the opposite direction. So now we got 2 methods here to control the claw. I need one more. Stop. And guess what speed we put in when we want to stop the motor from running? 0.0. So now we can completely control our claw subsystem with these 3 commands. Now we just got these 3 methods on this class. So now we just need to go in and call these from somewhere. So where does that happen? Well, we looked at OI earlier and you saw that these commands are running. So when I press this, it's going to call this. So let's go over to the open claw command, which if you look over here, open claw command, it is a timed command. And here's where remember the requires I was talking about, where the commands kind of coordinate and operate together. You know, one will interrupt the other if it gets called. So this required is here. When we call open claw command, we pass in that timeout value of 2 seconds. And this super is calling actually timed command, which is going to handle our timeouts for us. So you can just imagine we're saying, hey, claw command, run for this this amount of time, and we sent in 2 seconds. If you remember what we put in, let's see, that was over in OI, right? So we put in new open claw for 2 seconds. So if I go back over to open claw, it's going to come in here for 2 seconds. So that means our timeout's going to run 2 seconds and then complete. So when you start these things, it goes through a series of, it calls commands in order. So the first thing it always does is initialize, and then execute will run periodically. It'll run every 20 milliseconds. That's just the cycle of calling all the currently active commands. It'll call every active command and say execute and do whatever you're supposed to do, and then it'll go back to sleep, and then every next 20 milliseconds it'll wake up and keep going. So initialize runs once. This runs until it completes. End is called when you want to stop this thing, and interrupted, this is the one that depends on this requires. So if open is running and then close, somebody hits the close button, this interrupted is called. So what we want to do in initialize, we're going to call, and this is, if you remember, our robot had the claw subsystem in it, right? So let's go through this real quick. Remember I said things are public or private? Well, here's the claw subsystem. It's public. Don't worry about the static for right now. That's for another day. So the claw subsystem is public, so anybody can go and ask the robot, hey, give me the claw subsystem, and it'll give it to you. And the claw subsystem is declared here. So you're going to get that instance of the claw subsystem. And if you remember, the claw subsystem is where we created all of our commands that we can run on it. So if I bounce back over here, so I say, robot, give me the claw subsystem, and let's call open claw, because this is the open claw command. Cool. So now our motor is running at speed 1 until it stops. And when it'll stop is either when this timeout occurs. When the timeout hits, what happens is the execute will stop running. We're not going to do anything in execute. It's going to call end. So what do we want to do in end? Well, let's call robot claw subsystem stop claw. That makes sense, right? So if I'm running. The timeout is over. It sets the speed to 0. And guess what we want to do here? The same thing. But rather than call that, I can just call the method on my own class, because I'm protected. I can call these methods within here private as well. Subclasses can call protected, but just trust me. End here. So if we get interrupted, it's going to do end, which is going to stop the claw, and then the next command gets to run. So now we're set up. Open claw is set up to run. So let's go over and do stop. Going to be the same deal. Initialize is going to be robot.claw subsystem dot, and this is going to be close. No, sorry, I'm on the stop. Stop claw. Okay, no execute. Don't worry about it's finished. This is not a time command. There's nothing else to do because it can't get interrupted. It stops and it's done. It's boom and it's over. So we're done. The stop command is completely finished with, as soon as you hit the stop. Oh, if you hit the stop button, this is also going to get called, right? Let's go back and look over at OI again. Stop claw, when pressed, new stop command. Where did my stop command go? Stop claw command, here, boom, done. And it calls the claw subsystem and stops. We're through. So now let's look at close. We didn't do anything in close yet. Initialize, it's the same thing. It kind of gets repetitive, but if you do things right, there should be patterns emerging. And this is basically what's going to happen when you have timed commands that are all competing for one subsystem. So once again, robot dot claw subsystem dot close claw. Make sure I did that right over here. Did I call? The claws close. Yeah, open claw, close claw. When we end, we're going to call robot dot claw subsystem dot stop claw. And if we get interrupted, end. And like I said, you could do, instead of doing end, let's just do this, just because it's the same thing. I could call robot claw stop. It's the same thing. I just did a shortcut earlier. So instead of calling end, I did this. We'll just leave it that way for variety. Although I don't like variety, it's nice to see things that are nice and consistent, because then that makes the next person that comes along and reads this understand everything. So now I believe we are set up and ready to go. This thing should work pretty well. So let's just go back over this real quick. We've got our claw subsystem, which has a single controller called claw controller on PWM0. There's no default commands. There's nothing periodic running in this thing. It's just sitting there waiting. And someone externally will say, hey, start the open claw, which is going to run the motor in one direction. Close claw is going to run it the other direction. Stop claw is going to set it to 0, so it'll stop it. So that's pretty simple. And let's go over and look at open. Open claw. We're calling this, there's multiple ways to call this, but we're calling it with a timeout value. It's going to set this to 2 seconds. When it gets called and it gets initialized, it's going to start the open claw. So it's opening, running at whatever speed. And then 2 seconds later, if nobody pushes another button, end gets called, it's going to stop the claw. If somebody were to push the stop claw button or push the close claw, it's going to immediately end and call stop claw. So it's weird if it calls stop claw and stop claw, calls stop claw, but it doesn't matter. You're setting the motor to 0 and twice. So no big deal there. We could probably clean that up and make it a little smarter, but we'll leave it as is for now. Close. Let's see. Requires, that's correct. Close claw, stop, and stop. And then stop claw is just going to call stop claw. And that's the whole thing. The big things that you need to take away is, go in here and look, and this is where our OI is getting set up, and that's really building the whole robot for this lesson. And it's very simple. There's buttons sitting there waiting, and when they get pressed, they're going to do whatever, they're going to call whatever command is applied to them when they're created. That's it. And your commands are going to run. So that's hopefully a little bit more information in Java. There's a lot there. There's classes and instantiations and things like that, and attributes and methods. You're just going to have to start getting familiar with that, and it'll get easier as you go along and start doing this. I will put a link to the slides that I did with this. It kind of goes through what I walked through here, and you can actually look at the slides, and maybe that'll help you rather than listening to me again. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.